Imagine the stroke of midnight in a frost-bitten chapel, candles guttering like dying breaths. 7 shadowed figures, once chained in body, now free in flesh, rise as one. Their lips part, and out spills a torrent of words from the abyss, ancient, unearthly, laced with the wail of forgotten sins. Was it divine wrath, or the dead demanding justice? You won't look away. In the brittle chill of December 1868, Valdosta, Georgia, clung to life like a withered vine on a crumbling trellis. The Civil War's echoes still thundered in the silence of empty streets, where the wind carried whispers of lost battles and shattered families. 3 years since Appomattox, the surrender that promised peace, but delivered only a hollow truce. The air tasted of damp earth and decaying leaves, mingled with the acrid smoke from hearth fires struggling against the cold. Grand antebellum homes along Patterson Street loomed like spectral guardians, their once vibrant facades now peeled and faded, windows staring blankly like eyes devoid of soul. Gardens, overrun with thorny weeds, choked the paths where children once played. The war had reaped its harvest, sons buried in distant fields, fathers returned as hollow shells, fortunes evaporated like morning mist. What remained was a fragile veneer of normalcy, cracked and ready to shatter under the weight of unspoken grudges. The cotton fields, vast and unforgiving, stretched beyond the town's edges like scarred battlegrounds. Once the lifeblood of prosperity, they now lay fallow in patches, tended by hands that were free in name but bound by necessity. Freedmen and women toiled under sharecropping agreements that echoed the chains of old debts that multiplied like sins unconfessed, trapping them in cycles of labor without end. The railroad depot, a skeletal frame of rusted iron and weathered wood, stood sentinel at the town's heart, its platforms echoing with the ghosts of bustling commerce. Trains arrived sporadically now, carrying not wealth, but reminders of isolation. Barrels of flour, bolts of cloth, but no salvation from the poverty that gnawed at the edges of survival. Amid this desolation, the newly emancipated navigated a world laced with peril. The Freedmen's Bureau office, a squat wooden structure on Hill Avenue's corner, served as a beleaguered outpost. Inside, Agent Elias Hawthorne, a Yankee transplant with weary eyes and ink-stained fingers, labored under flickering lamplight. He mediated land disputes, solemnized unions born of love long denied, and scrounged for employment opportunities in a town that viewed him as an interloper. His desk overflowed with petitions, pleas for education, protection from vengeful former masters, seeds to plant futures. But his power was illusory, challenged by white residents who saw emancipation as a divine affront, a reversal of God's ordained order. Whispers in saloons spoke of reclaiming what was rightfully theirs, veiled threats that hung like storm clouds. Most freed people moved through Valdosta like shadows at dusk, heads bowed, voices muted, steps careful to avoid stirring the embers of resentment. They labored in the same fields, washed the same linens, mended the same fences, under contracts that demanded subservience. To draw attention was to invite retribution, a barn burned in the night, a family evicted under false pretenses, or worse, the noose of vigilante justice. Yet, in this atmosphere of guarded existence, 7 souls dared to seek solace in the house of God. They attended services at the First Methodist Chapel on Ashley Street, a modest sanctuary of whitewashed walls and steepled roof, its bell tolling like a call to redemption. Invited by Reverend Josiah Harlan, a man whose faith had been forged in the crucible of war. Reverend Harlan, at 45, bore the weight of his convictions in the lines etched around his piercing blue eyes. His frame was lean, almost ascetic, clad in a threadbare frockcoat that spoke of humility over ostentation. As a Union chaplain, he had knelt in mud-churned fields, administering last rites to boys from both sides, their blood mingling in the earth as a testament to shared humanity. The horrors he witnessed, limbs shattered by cannon fire, faces contorted in agony, had stripped away his illusions of Southern righteousness. Returning to Valdosta in 1867, he vowed to make the chapel a beacon of true Christian mercy, a place where the chains of prejudice could be broken. For all have sinned and fall short, he preached, quoting Romans, his voice resonant with quiet fire. Inviting the freed slaves was an act of defiance wrapped in piety, one that splintered his flock. Wealthy parishioners departed in huff, their tithes withdrawn like withheld grace. Others lingered, casting sidelong glares, murmuring of uppity intrusions. But Harlan persisted, seeing in their presence a chance for communal atonement, a step toward healing the wounds of slavery's original sin. The 7 were inscribed in the chapel's ledger with reverent care: Miriam, 44, the matriarch with calloused hands and a gaze that held the depth of ancient wells, Ezekiel, 39, his broad shoulders marked by whip scars like twisted vines, Lydia, 27, soft-spoken with eyes that darted like trapped birds, Tobias, 32, a former field hand whose muscles spoke of unyielding toil, Ruth, 23, her youth shadowed by losses that aged her soul, Amos, 41, a quiet enforcer from plantation days, now haunted by the ghosts of his complicity, and Naomi, 20, the youngest, her fingers nimble from sewing dreams into tattered cloth. All hail from the forsaken Harrow Plantation, 10 miles south, where Sherman's torches had lit the night sky in 64, freeing them amid chaos and flame. They lingered in Valdosta, piecing together lives from fragments. Miriam laundered linens in a steam-filled shack, her back aching like penance. Ezekiel hauled crates at the depot, each lift a reminder of burdens borne. Lydia served in a Patterson street household, invisible amid the clatter of silverware. Tobias mended tools with borrowed hammers, dreaming of his own forge. Ruth picked cotton bolls until her fingers bled, each prick a thorn in her crown of sorrow. Amos tended graves in the moonlit cemetery, conversing with the dead to escape the living. Naomi stitched seams by candlelight, weaving hopes into fabrics worn by others. They were unassuming, their presence a whisper in the chapel's chorus. Arriving before the bell's first peal, they claimed the rear pews, bodies aligned like sentinels in the dim light filtering through stained glass. Dressed in faded calico and homespun wool, they listened to Harlan's words on grace and forgiveness, faces impassive masks hiding tempests within. No disruptions, no claims to equality beyond silent worship. Yet, beneath their composure simmered the residue of trauma, families sold like chattel, names stripped and replaced, bodies violated in the name of dominion. Slavery's sin had etched itself into their spirits, a biblical curse awaiting its reckoning. As Christmas approached, a merciless frost descended, encasing Valdosta in crystalline armor. The ground cracked underfoot like brittle bones, trees groaned under ice's weight, their branches sagging in supplication. The town feigned festivity, evergreen boughs draped doorways, their scent a fleeting balm against despair. Candles flickered in frost-etched panes, casting golden halos on snow-dusted sills. The general store displayed meager offerings, wooden tops, faded ribbons, tokens of joy in a season marred by absence. Harlan prepared meticulously, adorning the chapel with holly wreaths and pine garlands, their sharp needles pricking fingers like reminders of Christ's thorns. His sermon took shape in solitary nights, words chosen to evoke the Nativity's miracle, light piercing darkness, hope birthed in humility. He visited the seven that eve, bearing humble gifts, a crusty loaf symbolizing the bread of life. Preserved sweet as redemption's promise, scarves woven with threads of warmth. Their thanks were murmured prayers, eyes downcast, as if kindness were a trap long learned to evade. The midnight service unfolded under a canopy of stars veiled by clouds heavy with unshed snow. The chapel brimmed with congregants, families huddled in pews, breaths mingling in visible puffs despite the pot-belly stove's glow. Candlelight danced across faces etched with weariness, illuminating cheeks hollowed by hunger, eyes shadowed by grief. The air hummed with expectancy, scented by melting wax, fresh-cut greenery, and the earthy tang of damp overcoats. Harlan ascended the pulpit, his voice a steady anchor, tales of Bethlehem's stable, Mary's faithful surrender, Joseph's protective vigil. He wove in parables of the overlooked, the shepherds, first witnesses to glory, mirroring the marginalized in their midst. In the least of these, he intoned, we find the divine. The assembly absorbed his words, some with bowed heads in reverence, others with crossed arms of doubt, the seven in their corner like statues carved from ebony and resolve. Midnight struck. The chapel's clock, a relic with brass hands worn smooth, told 12 solemn notes, each reverberating through the rafters like judgments from on high. Harlan paused, a serene smile acknowledging the sacred threshold. Then, Miriam rose. Not with grace, but as if yanked by invisible strings, her frame taut, fingers clawing the pew ahead like anchors in a storm. Her eyes, wide and vacant, fixed on horizons unseen. Lips parted, and forth erupted a cascade, not words, but utterances primordial, guttural syllables rolling like thunder from forgotten tombs. Kalis Emer Visha, they seemed to intone, rhythms pulsing with the cadence of ancient laments, echoes of Babel's confusion or Pentecost's fire. The chapel inhaled sharply. Heads swiveled, candles sputtered as if exhaling fear. Before murmurs could rise, Ezekiel joined, his baritone weaving seamlessly, then Lydia's soprano threading through, Tobias's rumble anchoring, Ruth's tremor adding fragility, Amos's gravel deepening, Naomi's youth lending ethereal highs. 7 voices fused in unearthly harmony, a chorus defying comprehension. Not cacophony, but symphony, synchronized breaths, inflections rising like pleas to heaven, falling like condemnations to earth. The sounds evoked biblical tongues, glossolalia, perhaps, the Spirit's gift or demonic mimicry. They built layers, harmonics vibrating the wooden beams, rattling hymnals, stirring dust motes into frenzied dance. Congregants petrified, a mother's hand clutched her child's, a veteran's knuckles whitened on his cane, eyes wide with dread of the supernatural. Was this divine intervention, retribution for slavery's abomination? Or the unleashing of buried traumas, sins of the fathers visiting in spectral voice? Harlan's face blanched, his raised hand trembling, words dissolving in his throat like salt in water. A chill wind, unbidden, snaked through cracks, bending flames sideways, casting grotesque shadows that writhed like tormented souls. A gasp escaped a pew, then a stifled cry, shattering the trance. Some bolted for doors, coats flapping like raven wings, fleeing into the night's embrace. The utterance persisted, 2 interminable minutes of escalation, volumes swelling to roars, tempos quickening like hearts in terror, peaking in a crescendo that pressed against eardrums, souls. Themes emerged in the mind's ear: accusations of greed, laments for stolen innocence, calls for justice echoing Isaiah's prophecies. Then, abrupt cessation. The 7 collapsed into seats as one, expressions serene yet distant, as if emerging from prophetic trance. Silence descended, thick and oppressive, broken by muffled sobs, the drip of wax, the creak of settling wood. Chaos erupted, screams pierced the void, bodies surged outward, leaving the chapel a hollow shell. Remaining, Harlan, rooted at the pulpit, faith-tested, Dr. Elias Thorne, the pragmatic healer with steady hands and skeptical brow, clerk Harlan Voss, notebook poised like a shield, Deacon Matthias Crow, war-hardened and unyielding. And the 7, placid as lambs, unaware or unrepentant of the storm unleashed. Dr. Thorne advanced first, steps measured, pulse quickening beneath his calm facade. The air hummed with residual energy, a spiritual aftershock. What force had seized them? A collective hysteria, born of oppression's weight? Or a heavenly reckoning, tongues of fire igniting in the oppressed? The mystery hung, pregnant with implications, guilt's shadow over a town built on iniquity, the past's refusal to be interred. In that moment, divine justice felt palpable, a chilling reminder that sin's unspoken fester, awaiting their voice. As dawn's first light crept over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and reluctant gold, Valdosta awoke to whispers. Rumors spread like frost across glass, possession by vengeful spirits, a miracle heralding end times, or simply the madness of the marginalized. The 7 returned to their labors, but eyes followed them, wary, accusatory. Harlan pondered in his study, Bible open to Acts 2, where the Spirit descended in tongues, unifying the divided. Yet here, division deepened. Families boycotted services, letters arrived decrying the abomination. The Freedmen's Bureau noted the incident, Hawthorne scribbling reports of potential unrest. Thorne examined the 7 the next day, in the chapel's vestry lit by slanting sunbeams. Pulses normal, eyes clear, no fever or delusion. They recalled nothing, black voids where memory should reside. It felt like dreaming, Miriam murmured, her voice a threadbare whisper. Like something old waking up inside. Psychological echoes, Thorne theorized, traumas resurfacing in glossolalic outburst, a collective cry against silenced suffering. But doubt not, the synchronization defied science, hinting at metaphysical bonds. Voss documented meticulously, his quill scratching parchment, times, utterances phonetically approximated, witnesses' accounts. A language of the soul, he later confided, or perhaps of judgment. Crow, ever the guardian, saw threat, the devil's work, stirring rebellion. Yet Harlan preached on, weaving the event into sermons of redemption. Slavery is Pharaoh's yoke, emancipation is Exodus, the tongues as manna or warning. Weeks blurred into months, the incident etching itself into folklore. Children whispered of haunted pews, elders crossed themselves passing the chapel. The 7's lives intertwined deeper, shared visions and dreams, fragments of the chant recurring like psalms. Empathy bloomed among some whites, guilt seed sprouting in fertile remorse. Others hardened, forming patrols to maintain order, shadows of the clan lurking. Spiritually, the event resonated with biblical undertones, the Tower of Babel's confusion reversed, or Joel's prophecy of poured-out spirit. Themes of divine retribution wove through, for the sin of enslavement, a haunting legacy demanding acknowledgement. Redemption flickered, Harlan's. Invitations expanded, tentative bridges built over chasms of hate. Yet dread lingered, a chilling undercurrent. What if the tongues foretold greater upheaval? Justice delayed, but not denied. In archives yellowed by time, accounts persist: Thorne's medical journal, Voss's ledgers, Harlan's sermons. They paint a portrait of a town on redemption's precipice, where 7 voices pierced the veil, releasing something eternal. Empathy for the 7 swells, their quiet dignity amid chaos, symbols of resilience. Curiosity gnaws: what ancient tongue? African roots, biblical echoes, or psychic unison born of shared agony? The mystery endures, spiritually chilling, a reminder that buried sins resurface, demanding voice. In Valdosta's quiet streets, one might still hear echoes on Christmas Eve, whispers of justice, redemption's call, or the past's unyielding grip. This is the legacy, not miracle or madness, but the soul's refusal to be silenced, a divine whisper in the dark. The chapel's silence stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap under the weight of what had just transpired. Candle flames, once flickering wildly, now steadied into solemn pools of light, casting elongated shadows that danced across the scarred wooden floors like restless spirits. The scent of melted wax mingled with the sharp tang of pine boughs, now oppressive in the confined space, as if the very air bore witness to an unspoken transgression. Reverend Harlan, his face ashen under the pulpit's dim glow, gripped the lectern's edge, knuckles whitening like bones unearthed. His breath came in shallow rasps, echoing faintly against the vaulted ceiling. Dr. Thorne knelt first, his knees creaking on the cold planks, approaching Miriam with the caution of a man handling fragile relics. Her wrist, slender and veined like river maps of hardship, pulsed steadily under his fingers, strong, unyielding, a rhythm defying the chaos that had unfolded. He peered into her eyes, dark pools reflecting the candlelight like distant stars in a midnight sky. Pupils contracted normally, no haze of fever or delusion. "Miriam," he murmured, voice a low rumble laced with clinical detachment yet undercut by unease, "do you hear me?" She blinked, slow as dawn breaking, confusion etching lines across her weathered brow. "Yes, doctor. I hear." Her words emerged soft, tentative, like whispers from a confessional booth. "Where are you?" "The chapel, on Ashley Street." "And what transpired just now?" A pause, heavy as lead. Her gaze drifted, searching inward. The Reverend was speaking of the birth, the Holy Child. Then, nothing. A void, sir. Like sleep without dreams. Thorne moved methodically to Ezekiel, then Lydia, Tobias, Ruth, Amos, Naomi, each examination a ritual of probing fingers on pulses, lamps held to eyes. Questions probing the fog of amnesia. All vital signs mirrored health, breaths even, hearts steady as metronomes. No tremors, no sweats, no signs of laudanum's haze or moonshine's fire. Yet their recollections ended at Harlan's sermon on humility, the divine favoring the lowly like shepherds in fields, or slaves in chains. A collective blackout, as if some higher power had veiled their minds from the act itself. Was this mercy shielding them from divine fury? Or a curse, erasing the evidence of sin's eruption? Clerk Voss, ever the chronicler, had scribbled furiously throughout, his quill scratching like claws on bone. Pages filled with phonetic renderings, Kalis Emer Visha, Nurakal, Emer Shavinura. He noted rhythms, trisyllabic clusters repeating in waves, variations building like psalms in escalation. Not gibberish, but architecture, intentional, layered, evoking ancient liturgies or forbidden incantations. Deacon Crow lingered by the door, arms folded like barriers against the profane, his war-scarred face a mask of stoic granite. Battles at Antietam had shown him hell's visage, limbs strewn like harvest chaff, screams blending with cannon roar, but this? This burrowed deeper, challenging the soul's fortifications. No bayonets here, only voices weaving a tapestry of dread. Harlan descended the steps, robes whispering like ghosts in passage, approaching the 7 with palms outstretched in benediction. "Children," he intoned, voice cracking like dry earth, "are you harmed? Does illness grip you? Speak your needs." Heads shook in unison, a eerie echo of their earlier synchronization. Miriam, voice threadbare as her shawl, replied for all, "Forgive us, Reverend. We meant no offense to the Lord's house." But we recall not. Her eyes, wide with unspoken terror, betrayed the facade flickers of fear, like embers in ash. Harlan's reassurance rang hollow, no disruption, only mystery. Rest in grace. Yet his own spirit churned, had he invited this? His push for inclusion, a bridge over slavery's abyss, now felt like tempting fate. The seven rose slowly, movements languid as if reclaiming bodies from ethereal possession. Coats donned with trembling hands, scarves wrapped against the biting night. They file out, silhouettes merging into the frost-veiled darkness, footsteps crunching on iced gravel like brittle judgments. The remaining quartet stood sentinel in the emptying sanctuary, silence a shroud enveloping them. Thorn broke at first, voice gravelly, in all my ears stitching wounds, easing fevers, nothing akin to this. Voss glanced at his notes, ink still glistening, nor I. But mark this, not anarchy. Design. Purpose woven through. Purpose? Crow snapped, eyes narrowing like rifle sights. You imply orchestration? A ploy? Voss shrugged, uncertainty shadowing his precision. I claim only what ears perceived. Harmony, not havoc. Harlan slumped into a pew, head bowed as in prayer, fingers interlacing like pleas. What tale do we spin for the morrow? How frame this enigma without fanning flames? No replies came, only the stove's dying crackle, embers glowing like accusatory eyes. Dawn pierced the horizon, pale light filtering through frost-laced windows, but Valdosta stirred to rumors hotter than any forge. Whispers slithered from hearth to hearth, tales mutating like viruses in the cold air. By breakfast, the chapel's event had bloated into legend, demonic choruses summoning hellfire, eyes rolling white as judgments scroll, temperatures plummeting to Sheol's chill. Widow Eliza Thornton, seated in the third row that night, regaled neighbors over steaming tea. Their voices layered like legions, thousands wailing as one. And the cold, breath visible as ghosts exhaling wrath. Shopkeeper Amos Reed, who bolted amid the panic, swore by his ledger, drums thrummed beneath, pounding from earth's bowels, sinking with their chant. Pagan rites, I tell you. Schoolmarm Clara Voss, kin to the clerk and bastion of reason, confessed in hushed letters, a presence pressed upon me, heavy, ancient. Skin prickled as if brushed by unseen hands, heart hammered like Cain's after the mark. By midday Christmas, paranoia gripped the town like iron shackles. Gifts unwrapped in haste, carols silenced mid-verse. Families clustered indoors, doors bolted against invisible foes. Some invoked biblical plagues, locusts of judgment upon Pharaoh's heirs, slavery's architects now facing retribution. Others saw Satan's handiwork, a post-war temptation testing fragile faith. Harlan convened a gathering 2 days hence, the courthouse packed with bodies radiating heat and hostility. Wooden benches groaned under weight, air thick with tobacco smoke and unwashed wool. He mounted the dais, eyes ringed in shadow from sleepless vigils, voice strained as taut strings. What befell us was anomalous. Not malice, I wager, but sorrow's outcry. Trauma's tongue, loosed in sacred space. Murmurs rippled, skeptical waves crashing. Farmer Josiah Kane bellowed from the rear, drive them out. Affront to God-fearing folk. Widow Beatrice Lowe, Gettysburg scar still raw, demanded exorcism, let a holy man probe their souls, cast out the demons. Merchant Elias Ford, war profiteer with ledgers stained by greed, cried quarantine, lock them away till truth outs. Thorn rose next, stature commanding respect forged in surgical tents. Post-event, I assessed them thoroughly. No ailments, no toxins, no faints. Faculties sharp as scalpels. Perhaps hysteria, mind's fracture under duress. Yet his tone wavered, wartime breakdowns were solitary storms, not choral tempests. This synchronized anomaly hinted at deeper mysteries, collective psyche, or spiritual convergence? Voss followed, unfolding notes like sacred texts, patterns evident, syllabic triads, rhythmic cycles, unison flawless as angelic hosts. Not babble, structure, akin to tongue of prophets. The crowd erupted, language of devils. Interrogate them. Fear alchemized to fury, demands for expulsion echoing like judgments at Babel. Harlan pled order, but chaos reigned, no verdict, only division's seed sown deeper. No arrests followed, no statute condemned glossolalia. Yet ostracism descended swift as divine wrath. Employers shunned, Miriam's linens pile untouched, Ezekiel barred from depot docks. Lydia dismissed with curt notes, Tobias's hammer silenced. Ruth's fields forbidden, Amos's graves untended, Naomi's needle idle. Destitution clawed at them within days, pantries bare, hearths cold, survival on scraps from kin in shadows. Fellow freedmen slipped aid under moonless skies, understanding exile's sting, blame's unjust yoke. Harlan intervened, baskets brimming with loaves and quilts, sermons pleading mercy, as Christ forgave the adulteress, so must we. But ears deafened, his flock thin like autumn leaves, coffers emptied, missives arrived and signed, threats veiled in scripture, decrying his betrayal of the flock. Obsession gripped Harlan, nights haunted by replays, voices rising like Ezekiel's dry bones assembling. Sleep fled, replaced by candlelit vigils, Bible pages thumbed to Acts Pentecost, where flames crowned apostles, tongues loosed in unity. Was this echo? Or inversion, retribution's fire upon oppressors' heirs? He probed discreetly, visiting the seven in hovels lashed by winter gales. Winds howled through chinks, floors dirt-packed like graves. Gifts proffered as olive branches, questions gentle as vespers. Reluctance yielded slowly, trust, long eroded by whips and sails, rebuilt in fragments. Revelations emerged, all bound to Harrow Plantation's final throes, witnesses to Nathaniel Harrow's demise in 64. A tyrant sculpted in cruelty's mold, towering frame, beard like thorny brambles, eyes glacial as judgment's blade. Inherited domain in 50, ruled by terror's scepter, lashes for whispers, families sundered for sport. Fear his currency, silence his decree. As Sherman's shadow loomed, paranoia festered. Pistol ever holstered, guards paced verandas under starless skies. Random torments, interrogations by lantern's glare, accusations of plot's phantom. December 20th, Barnes summoned all 30 souls herded like cattle to slaughter. Elijah, elder sage with wisdom etched in wrinkles, dragged forth. Accused of fomenting revolt, though his crime, teaching letters by moonlight. Harrow's verdict, swift pistols bark, blood blooming on straw like crimson atonement. Witnesses frozen, horror's sacrament, sin of murder, veiled as mastery, now a haunting specter. Did his death's echo birth the tongues? Divine justice, demanding confession from silenced throats? Weeks deepened the rift. Harlan's inquiries unearthed more, shared dreams among the 7 visions of Harrow's ghost, mouth agape and silent scream, fields aflame with righteous fire. Psychological scars, thorn-posited, manifesting in trance. Yet spiritually, it chilled, biblical echoes of blood crying from ground, like Abel's unto Cain. Redemption's path? Or retribution's inexorable march? Town simmered, vigilante whispers of handling the 7. Empathy stirred in few, guilt's whisper, acknowledging slavery's abomination. Curiosity nod, what language? African ancestral calls? Holy Spirit's glossolalia? Or trauma's invented dialect, bridging pain to voice? The legacy lingered, spiritually frigid, a town's sins exposed, justice's scales tipping. In quiet moments, one sensed the divine hovering, retribution or grace. The 7 endured, symbols of resilience amid exile, their silence now a profound sermon on forgiveness's cost. The Barnes air hung thick that fateful night in December 1864, saturated with the metallic tang of fear and the earthy musk of hay trampled underfoot. Lanterns swung from rafters like pendulums of judgment, casting jittery shadows that twisted across faces etched with decades of subjugation. Elijah, at 63, knelt in the center, his knees grinding into the dirt floor, hands bound not by ropes but by the invisible chains of inevitability. Born into bondage on the Harrow Plantation, he had become its quiet pillar, a beacon of unyielding spirit amid the storm of cruelty. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of ancestral wisdom, counsel for the weary, solace for the broken, sparks of hope in the abyss. People turned to him not as a rebel, but as a shepherd, guiding souls through slavery's wilderness with psalms whispered in the dead of night. Nathaniel Harrow's intrusion had shattered the fragile sanctity of Elijah's cabin hours earlier. The master, a colossus of a man over 6 feet, with a beard like tangled thorns and eyes as cold as forged steel, burst in flanked by overseers whose whips hung like serpents at their sides. Elijah was on his knees, lips moving in silent invocation, beseeching the Almighty for strength, for deliverance from the Pharaoh's yoke. Harrow's rage ignited like dry tinder, accusations of sorcery, of curses woven in the dark, of plots to topple his empire of terror. Witchcraft, he bellowed, voice echoing through the quarters like thunder from Sinai. Elijah's calm rebuttal, just prayer, master, seeking God's grace, fell on ears sealed by paranoia. Dragged through mud-slick paths, Elijah was thrust into the barn's maw, the enslaved herded like livestock to bear witness. 30 souls encircled him, breaths held in collective dread, the air pulsing with unspoken prayers. Harrow's pistol gleamed under lantern light, barrel pressed to Elijah's temple. "Let this be etched in your souls," Harrow snarled, his breath reeking of whiskey and wrath. The shot cracked, a deafening roar that splintered the night, reverberating through beams and bones alike. Elijah slumped forward, lifeblood seeping into the earth like Abel's cry to heaven, pooling in crimson accusation. Silence descended, suffocating, broken only by the drip of blood and the distant howl of wind through cracks. No one dared move, eyes averted, hearts pounding like war drums muffled by fear. Harrow holstered his weapon, gaze sweeping the assembly like a scythe. "Your prayers are dust here. Your God? Impotent. I am your judgment." He strode out, leaving the body as a macabre sermon, overseers prodding the crowd back to cabins where sleep would evade them, haunted by the echo of that fatal blast. 3 days later, dawn's reluctant light pierced Harrow's study, revealing his corpse sprawled across the desk, mouth agape in a silent scream, eyes bulging with frozen terror, face twisted in agony as if gazing upon hell's gates. Dr. Thorne, summoned hastily, noted the corpulence, the ruddy cheeks from excess, the veins strained by chronic fury. "Heart failure," he pronounced officially, quill scratching parchment in the dim room scented by stale cigar smoke and spilled ink. Plausible, given the man's vices. Yet whispers slithered through the quarters like vines reclaiming ruins, no struggle marks, no poison's trace, just an inexplicable end to a tyrant who supped heartily the night before. Some murmured of divine retribution, Elijah's prayers ascending like incense, summoning the angel of death to Passover's grim reversal. The Almighty heard, they breathed in shadowed huddles, and struck down the oppressor. But such notions were buried deep, lest they invite further lashes. Official records sealed the mundane verdict, chaos swallowing the supernatural hints as Sherman's bluecoats thundered closer. The army's arrival 2 days hence transformed the plantation into a pyre of liberation. Flames licked the great house, consuming tapestries and ledgers of human inventory, while fields lay abandoned under smoke-choked skies. Freed at last, the former slaves scattered like seeds on fallow ground, some northward to promised lands, others lingering in Valdosta's fringes, piecing lives from emancipation's fragments. The 7 Miriam, Ezekiel, Lydia, Tobias, Ruth, Amos, Naomi clung to the area, their shared scars binding them like invisible threads. Reverend Harlan, driven by faith's unyielding compass, delved deeper. Coincidences offended his sense of divine order, the Christmas tongues must root in that blood-soaked barn. He pressed the 7 in their drafty shacks, where winds whistled through walls like lamentations. "Were you there when Harrow fell? Any omen, any whisper?" Their responses mirrored, blanks in memory's canvas. The execution's horror vivid, gunshots thunder, blood's bloom, Harrow's decree like Satan's boast. Then Sherman's salvation. But the interim? A void, as if God himself veiled it, protecting fragile minds from trauma's full glare. Harlan rode south in late January's grip, horse plodding rutted paths. Flanked by skeletal pines, sky-leaden with unshed rain. The plantation loomed spectral, house a charred husk, walls crumbling like Babel's tower, floors sagging under decay's weight. The barn endured, roof caved like a wounded giant, doors askew on hinges screaming rust. Dismounting, Harlan traversed the grounds, boots crunching frost like brittle sins. The air hummed with absence echoes of whips, cries, chains clanking in phantom rhythm. No ghosts manifested, yet memory's weight pressed, a spiritual pall of suffering absorbed into soil. In the study's remnants, blackened timbers framing debris, he sifted ashes, fingers numb from cold. Amid rubble, a scorched leather journal emerged, pages curled but legible, Harrow's scrawl a testament to madness. Entries raved, slaves' conspiracies, nocturnal gatherings, heathen tongues cursing his dominion. December 19th chilled Harlan's blood, they whisper in shadows, led by the old man. Elijah chants their vile words. Tomorrow, I end it, prove their impotence. Tucking the tome away, Harlan galloped back, mind ablaze. That eve, confronting the seven, the old man, who? Silence fractured under Miriam's sigh. Kofi, she whispered, voice a fragile reed. Chained from Africa's shores as a boy. Eldest among us, bearer of forgotten lore, stories, melodies, syllables from home. Not curses, she insisted, but anchors, words to cling amid erasure, a linguistic ark against slavery's flood. Kofi perished weeks prior, worked to collapse in fields under Harrow's indifferent gaze, old bones cracking like dry branches. Elijah inherited the mantle, leading prayers in those fragments, a defiant liturgy in Babel's tongue. What uttered you that eve? Harlan probed. Miriam's eyes gleamed with ethereal sorrow. We recall no words, but perhaps completing Elijah's invocation. A prayer interrupted by lead, now resumed in divine timing. Harlan's spirit stirred biblical resonance, unfinished supplications echoing through generations, like David's Psalms or Christ's Gethsemane plea. Trauma as vessel for holy fire, glossolalia as redemption's voice. Concurrently, Dr. Thorne pursued empirical paths, his study cluttered with tones under gaslight's flicker. Glossolalia, tongue-speaking, chronicled from Pentecost's flames to revival tents. Letters dispatched to Piers, Atlanta's neurologists, Charleston's psychiatrists, Richmond's theologians. Replies varied: hysteria's collective spasm, epilepsy's vocal seizure, ecstasy's divine overflow. Yet none matched the synchronization, individual fits, not choral precision. Thorne contacted linguist Alastair Crow at Virginia's halls, detailing the phenomenon in ink-stained missives. Crow's reply, terse inquiry for recordings. None existed, shock had paralyzed pens. Thorne revisited Voss's notes, transcribing phonetic ghosts, clusters repeating like incantations. Forwarded to Crow, eliciting deeper analysis, no known dialect aligns, yet structure screams language intentional, taught. Chills gripped Thorne, instructed in obscurity? By whom? Sharing with Harlan in the parsonage, fire crackling like prophetic bones, they wove narratives: Kofi's legacy, Elijah's martyrdom, Harrow's haunted journal. A post-execution entry, sleepless, their echoes torment Elijah's gaze victorious in death. Why now? Thorne mused. Harlan theorized, trauma festers, awaiting release. Christmas, birth in humility, light-piercing dark, mirrored their plight, triggering eruption. Collective wounds, synchronized. By shared suffering, manifesting as spiritual outcry. To unravel, they summoned Crow south. He arrived February's chill, lanky frame alighting the depot, satchel brimming with lexicons and phonographs. Skeptical brows furrowed over tea, extraordinary claims demand proof. Yet intrigue sparked, potential linguistic relic, Africa's echo in American soil. Together, they interviewed the seven in Harlan's vestry, lamplight casting halos on bowed heads. Crow probed gently, fragments of Kofi's tongue? Recollections surfaced, syllables for strength, rhythms invoking ancestors. Attempts to replicate failed, amnesia veiled. Yet Crow discerned patterns in Voss's notes, Bantu echoes, perhaps, hybridized with biblical cadence. Not mere glossolalia, he posited, but cultural resurrection, suppressed heritage reclaiming voice. Spiritually, the puzzle deepened, divine justice's arc, bending toward revelation. Harrow's sin and silencing prayer rebounded, his death a harbinger. The seven as vessels, channeling retribution like prophets of old. Empathy swelled for them, bearers of generational guilt, their outburst a cathartic psalm. Dread-laced reflections, what if unfinished? More tongues to come, unraveling town's facade? Townsfolk's ostracism intensified, shadows lengthening like accusations. Harlan preached redemption, but Pews emptied. Thorne pondered psychological scars, post-war phantoms, now collective. Crow departed with notes, promising publication, yet mystery lingered, language from abyss, or heaven's whisper? In quiet nights, one sensed the divine hovering, justice's sword, mercy's balm. The legacy, trauma's voice, refusing burial, demanding witness. Dr. Alastair Crow's arrival stirred the stagnant air of Valdosta like a scholar's quill piercing forgotten parchment. Tall and angular, his frame clad in a woolen coat dusted with train soot, he disembarked with eyes sharp as flint, scanning the depot platform as if deciphering an ancient script. His satchel bulged with volumes on dialects long extinct, notebooks bound in cracked leather, and a gleaming phonograph, a mechanical marvel to capture voices fleeting as spirits. Skepticism armored him. Decades poring over glossolalia claims had revealed mostly charlatans or shattered minds. Yet, in Reverend Harlan's dimly lit parsonage, firelight flickering across Harrow's scorched journal and Boss's phonetic scrawls, doubt cracked. "Extraordinary," he murmured, voice laced with rare wonder, fingers tracing syllables like sacred runes. If verifiable, this eclipses known preservations, a linguistic ember smoldering through enslavement's inferno, shielded in oral shadows. Interviews commenced the morrow, in Harlan's study where sunlight slanted through frost-etched panes, casting golden bars across worn rugs scented with pine resin and aged wood. The seven arrived singly, footsteps hesitant on creaking floors, eyes wary of this Yankee interloper probing wounds long scabbed. Crow approached with reverence, seated across a scarred oak table, voice soft as vespers. "I seek not exploitation, but illumination to honor what was hidden." Patience unraveled defenses. Over days, fragments emerged like relics from soil. Miriam spoke first, voice trembling like autumn leaves, Kofi's songs, melodies weaving through quarters under moon's veil, words alien yet soothing, his eyes distant as if gazing upon lost horizons, gold coasts, village fires, ancestral drums. Ezekiel recalled tales, Kofi's homeland vivid in sorrowful timbre, rivers teeming, kin severed by chains, grief a perpetual shadow etching deeper lines. Lydia whispered phrases, greetings invoking peace, blessings for endurance, prayers murmured in toil's rhythm, treasures hoarded in heart's vault against erasure. Tobias echoed Kofi's mandate, remember, lest it perish. Pass to progeny, a flame unquenchable. Ruth evoked Elijah's succession, post-Kofi's collapse in sun-baked fields, prayers in those syllables, comfort's balm, linking to eternity's chain. Amos recounted Harrow's fury upon discovery, nocturnal vigils spied, fear's grip tightening like nooses unspoken. Naomi, youngest, clutched fragments blurred by trauma's fog, gunshots thunder, Elijah's fall, silence heavier than iron. Crow inscribed meticulously, quill dancing, phonetic clusters, rhythmic pulses evoking West African cadences, Akan echoes, perhaps Ga inflections, creolized through generations' crucible. Variations hinted at adaptation, survival's alchemy. Gently, he proposed recreation to reclaim Christmas Eve's utterance. Reluctance palpable, fear of unleashing unseen forces, but assurances from Harlan and Thorne prevailed. Mid-February's bite lingered, study warmed by crackling hearth, phonographs horn poised like a listening ear. The seven encircled, eyes shut, breaths sinking in meditative hush. Crow guided, recall the chapel's chill, midnight's chime, sermon's grace on the lowly. Silence stretched, taut as bowstrings. Then Miriam's lips parted, syllables tentative, amakosi niam asfo. Soft, probing memory's depths. Others joined Ezekiel's depth, Lydia's lilt, Tobias's anchor, Ruth's quiver, Amos's gravel, Naomi's clarity, weaving harmonics vibrating air, stirring dust motes into sacred dance. Subdued yet unmistakable, chapel's echo reborn, minute-long invocation building, cresting, ebbing into hush. Exhaustion etched faces upon opening eyes, souls drained as if channeling rivers from ancient wells. Crow replayed the cylinder, scratchy voices emerging ghostly, compared to notes, patterns aligning. Awe softened his features, a prayer of remembrance, he declared, voice hushed in revelation. Fragmentary, yet structured, plea to forebears, divine essence. Amakosi akin to Nkosi, chiefs or ancestors, Niam, the supreme in Akan lore, Asfo gratitude's variant. Translated loosely, ancestors, divine spirit, we thank. Remember us. We endure. We persist. Silence enveloped, profound, Harlan's tears tracing cheeks like baptismal waters, Thorne's brow furrowed in contemplative depth, the seven exchanging glances, recognition's spark, relief's balm, closure's whisper. Not malediction, Crow emphasized, affirmation against oblivion honoring silenced legions. A declaration etched in ether, resilience's anthem, cultural defiance blooming in sacred space. Presentation at the courthouse drew sparse attendance, benches echoing emptiness under vaulted ceilings scented with polished oak and lingering tobacco. Minds calcified post-Christmas hysteria, linguistic exegesis swayed few. Some embraced rationality, trauma's catharsis, cultural resurgence sans supernatural taint, relief washing over like absolution. Others entrenched in fear, demonic incursion, peril unchecked, ostracism persisted, doors barred, glances averted like crosses against evil. yet seeds sprouted in rare soil, empathy's tendrils. A handful viewed the seven as victors over atrocity, survivors forging voice from void. Tentative aid, employment offered, provisions shared, dignity restored in quiet gestures echoing Christ's parable of the Samaritan. Harlan's services endured, chapel's air redolent of wax and evergreen remnants. The seven reclaimed rear pews, silhouettes steadfast. Congregation trickled back, drawn by Harlan's unyielding compassion, sermons weaving inclusions thread through gospel tapestry. Never replete as pre-storm, yet healing's fragile mosaic. Thorne's treatise graced medical annals months hence, collective trauma's manifestation, memory's subterranean currents, synchronized psyche's enigma. Debates ignited pioneering insight or fanciful conjecture, enduring as psychological curiosity's marker. Crow retreated northward, recordings cradled like relics. Correspondence spanned oceans, European philologists, African informants tracing roots. Definitive origins elusive dialectal drifts, creolization's veil yet enriched discourse on diasporic heritage, linguistic tenacity amid annihilation. The seven reconstructed existences amid persistent thorns. Stigma lingered like winter's frost, yet resilience thawed paths. Miriam laundered anew, hands immersed in suds, mind cradling Kofi's melodies, silent treasures inviolable. Ezekiel hewed timber at the mill, muscles coiling savings toward soil of his own, legacy's foundation. Lydia served Quakers transplanted post-war, equity's rare oasis, queries unasked of that eve. Tobias forged in modest smithy, sparks flying as patronage grew, skill transcending prejudice. Ruth wed a carpenter from afar, relocating for horizons unshadowed by legend. Amos tended graves in solitude's embrace, dead's impartial company soothing isolation's ache. Naomi stitched masterpieces, needle dancing for discerning eyes valuing craft over rumor. Bonds endured, clandestine gatherings in humble cabins, lamplight flickering as syllables resurfaced, Kofi's gift, Elijah's prayer, Christmas's eruption. Mystery veiled motives, why then, why thus, yet significance resonated, homage to forebears, refusal of oblivion. Harlan visited steadfast, ears open to narratives, spirit pondering divine intricacies. Acceptance dawned, enigmas persist, faith thrives in ambiguity. Journal entries reflected, voices as resistance's pinnacle, stripped of all, clinging to identity's core. That night reshaped him, redemption in marginalized murmurs, God's whisper through oppressed throats. Valdosta progressed, war scars fading under Reconstruction's uneven bomb, then newer orders. The event morphed to folklore, whispers over porches, cautionary tales. Archives harbored truths, Voss's ledger, Thorne's paper, Crow's analyses, Harrow's confessions, dusty sentinels for posterity. Query eternal, psychological effusion, cultural resurrection, or metaphysical veil rending? Past's insistent emergence, mind's abyssal depths uncharted. The seven bore it privately till twilight years, Miriam to 1892, Ezekiel 1896, Lydia 1899, Tobias 1902, Amos 1904, Ruth 1908, Naomi 1910. Secrets interred with them, yet echoes lingered. Perhaps mysteries abide unresolved, wonders sustenance over certainty. Value in inquiry's flame, aw's eternal glow. Truth indelible, Christmas Eve 1868, seven in tone forgotten tongue, unison flawless, intent profound. Inherited from Kofi, torn from Ghana's embrace, sustained through Elijah's martyrdom. For him, for silenced multitudes, voices proclaiming presence amid erasure. The chapel endures on Ashley Street, modernized, pews renewed, lights electric, flock evolved. Yet in solitude's hush, on windless nights, faint resonances, whispers defying language's bounds. Reminder, raised voices transcend silencing, past permeates present, we endure, remembered, resilient, here.